All right, so we were discussing peace, uh, and we discussed, amongst many other things, that Jesus came to bring peace between God and man, but he also came to bring peace between men. Now, that's where it gets hard, okay? As we mentioned, it is not always easy to live at peace with all men. I think I've told you before, there have been times in my life when people didn't like me, and I couldn't figure out why. You ever been in that situation? Maybe you haven't, but I have. And again, if you're going to be in the public eye, people are going to make, well, they're going to make opinions. Uh, I was at a bluegrass festival this weekend, and before I went, I talked with Laura. I used to be really hard on musicians, and I'd critique them. I'd just, oh, that, this, had all these opinions. But as I've gotten older, I've tried my hardest not to critique their music. It doesn't, if I had my way, I'd always just be listening to the Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs or the Stanley Brothers, but they haven't been around for 50 years. You can, have you ever met anybody that just has a whole bunch of opinions about everything and wants to tell you? Uh, so what we try to do is we try to temper that, right? Uh, you better temper it if you're married, because if you said everything that was on your mind, you're not going to be married very long, right? Uh, Today, young people will say of a person like that, they'll say, well, he or she doesn't have a filter. And you know people like this. And as Christians, we certainly need to find a filter, just to function properly so that we can be examples to others. You could preach as much as you want, but nothing is going to influence more people for the kingdom of Christ more than your example. That's where we're at. And so we live in a world that is full of turmoil, and sometimes we can get caught up in it. And we can make opinions about things that damage our reputation as Christians. We don't have to always say what's on our mind. I've tried to encourage every church I've ever been to practice more tact. I think that's, as a matter of fact, I had a sermon when I was younger, the 11th commandment. Thou shalt have tact. Now, that's easier said than done because a lot of us don't know how to use tact. I always use the example of when you see somebody, if they've missed for a long time, you don't need to go up to them and say, we've missed you. If you say we've missed you, they may think, what's he mean by that? Missed me. And we've pointed out that they're gone and that we know it. And now they know that we know that they know that we know that they've been missing. When you could simply say, hey, it's great to see you. Do you see the difference? There is a difference, and it's called tact. Now, some people, and I know them, are going to say, what do they mean by that? Right? That's where it gets hard. You cannot live a life without offending people if you're going to interact with people. That's why as we get older, we don't do as much. And we certainly don't go out socially and make new friends as we get older. Why? Because making new friends is tiresome, and all that we need in our life is more drama, right? So that's why we do that. I didn't understand that a long time ago. I'd always heard people talk about cliques in the church. Have you ever heard that phrase? Well, what I have found out, and I may be wrong, and if I'm wrong, you can express your opinion, but what I find is not so much cliques, but I find old people who hang with the same people that they've hung with the last 50 years because they don't have the time or the energy to invest in going through all the drama that it takes to make new friends. And I get that. And I've always tried to tell people, no, there's no clique. They're just set in their ways. If you go over and ask them if you could sit at that table, every one of them would say, yeah, sit down. Right? And so, as Christians, we're called sometimes to be uncomfortable to make peace. It's not always easy. It's not always easy. When preachers get up and tell you that the Christian life is the easiest life, they are not being fully honest with you. I know of so many times when my brethren were doing good for people, helping people, and those people that they were working to do good turned on them. Have you ever had that happen? People second guess your motives. People attack your reputation. Now, we need to guard our reputation. Denver used to tell us, boys, you could spend a lifetime building a reputation and it only takes seconds to tear it down. We've got to watch those things. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the circumstances that we run into with people who we love and invest time with, and then they hurt us. What do? We follow the advice of the Bible. In as much as we can, live at peace with all men. And there are times in the Lord's church when my brethren have let me down. And as I said at the beginning, times when they don't like me. They're making opinions. They're critiquing. And the old preachers used to say that after church, folks would go home and have roast preacher. And as I say, that certainly is the case. But we need to give our brethren the benefit of the doubt sometimes. And I'm going to say this here, and I want you to listen. There is a difference between being our brother's keeper and minding our own business. And I think sometimes in the past, the church has failed at that. There are a lot of positions in the Bible, but I've never read of brotherhood policemen in the Bible. That's not a position. You tired of the lesson already? We don't know what to do. You know, if you take them back there, I told her take them back there and make it miserable for them. If you take your kids back there, they're smart. They start realizing, well, they can get back there and play, right? So it's a fine line, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. But I don't want Laura having any fun at all back there. So, well, let me move on here. Jesus did come to bring peace between man. If it is possible, as much that lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Romans 12:18. But he would go on to say in Romans 14:19, let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace. Well, what are those things? Well, he goes on. Let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and things wherewith one may edify one another. So what does that mean? If you want to live peaceably with man and with your brethren, matter of fact, I think this is in the context of brothers and sisters in Christ. If you want to live peaceably, look to edify one another. Encourage one another. Look for something that you can in a person and lift that up. You know, you could find something good about everybody. It's like the old woman, there was a dog in town, and everybody hated this dog. And there was a woman in town who just was bubbling over and never had a bad thing to say about anybody. And one day, that woman was walking down the street, and that dog was walking down the street, and there were a number of old men that were there, and they said, I want to see what the old lady's got to say about the dog. See if she's got anything good to say. Well, they met at the corner, and the dog bared his teeth and growled at her. She looked up at the men and said, he's got beautiful teeth, doesn't he? Well, we all need a little more of that, don't we? Again, this is something we ought to do. Strive to be at peace. And we can only do that sometimes if we're willing to give a little bit. We don't need to argue so much. All right. You run into people and you find that they like to argue. You ever met anybody who likes to argue? You like to argue? Well, you don't argue much with me. I've got a different relationship with Tommy. He's always so sweet and gentle to me. But some people like to argue. Uh, and, you hear something and, well, we've talked about this. You ever have brethren who come up to you and they just want to let you know that they know everything? And, and you're tempted to set them straight? Here is a fact. Generally, that person that wants to let you know that they know everything is trying their hardest to impress you. All right? Sometimes, what would it hurt to let them? There are things, I've come to the conclusion that I'm a nerd about a lot of things. And I'll hear people, especially when it has to do with history or something like that, they'll say something, and they're close, but there's fine points that they're off on. And I'm tempted to say, and 9 times out of 10, as I've gotten older, I don't say a thing. I know that they are telling me this because they know that I'm excited about history. And they want to endear themselves to me. That goes a long way, folks. And I think we need to continue to be tactful with people and work with people. It takes a lifetime. But what I'm telling you is simply what the Bible is saying. Look at this. Let us therefore follow after things which make peace. Now, let's break that verse down just a little bit more. If we are to follow after things that make peace, maybe we shouldn't follow after things that are against peace. What do I mean by that? Well, there are things like politics that get people very, very excited. And we need to watch how we handle this. I think that as Christians, we need to make our message known. And that's not easy. That's not easy at all. Especially because when it comes down to it, we've learned this. There are really only 2 political parties in this country that have any power whatsoever, the Republicans and the Democrats. And so what happens is immediately when it comes to politics, people are trying to divide you into one of those 2. And with that comes a lot of baggage. All right? And years ago, I decided that I was not going to rally behind any party. I vote, and I generally don't even tell people where I land. And I have voted for both parties. I might explain that a little bit to you. Where I was in Ohio, coal mining and abortion, generally both parties agreed on the same thing in my regional political, what do you call it, area. And so, we're just getting to where we're so divided, and it's leaked over into the church. If I tell somebody I'm a preacher and they don't know me, you know what they immediately assume? Generally, they immediately assume that I'm a right-wing Republican. That's where the conversation goes. I'm not making it up. Why would they assume that? Because I'm religious. So what have we done? I'm not giving you an answer tonight. I'm just asking you, do we really want to be aligned with parties above the kingdom of Christ? But that's how the world sees us now. And I don't have the answer for it. All right? I can tell you this. I'm cynical. I am not a member of a party. They're all guilty in my book until proven innocent. But again, I live in a country where I have the right to vote, and I've got to vote, and that's not always the easiest. This election has made it a little easier for me. Oh, by the way, did you hear the president has dropped out? So I don't know what's going to happen now. I think he's going to stay until his term is up, but that should be interesting. we've had some interesting weeks. I saw that former President Trump uh, called J.D. Vance in as his VP pick. J.D. Vance is from Middletown, Ohio. That's not far from me at all, where I grew up. Have any of you seen the movie Hillbilly Elegy? Okay, so I'll say something about that right now. Uh, I will not let my daughters. Well, let me rewind. I grew up in an idyllic situation. I grew up in the country in a farming community, and I think my childhood, my grade school education, so much of it was just about as good as it could get. But Elizabeth and Jocelyn, they didn't grow up like that. Times changed. When I graduated, by that time, all of the coal mines shut down. All of the factories along the river shut down. There was nothing but rust left. And immediately, almost every kid in my class moved to Columbus for jobs. Okay? I think only a handful went to college. And this plays out in small towns all across the Midwest and down through Appalachia and right here in West Virginia. And what took its place was idle time. And idle time is the devil's workshop. And what happened is people spent their time drinking and going after pills and drugs. And our small Rust Belt towns in America are full of this. And where I was shielded growing up and naive, you might say, about a lot of things, because my parents shielded me, I was not able to do that with my daughters. And I won't let them watch that movie. I forbid it, because it paints a picture that is so real. When I was a kid, heroin was something that was a problem in the worst places in the inner city. Now, it's all over the suburbs. And fentanyl took its place. And now, did you see Steve Ducey asked the White House spokesman the other day about this new drug? Have any of you been following it? It's called Rainbow Fentanyl, and it is promoted to kids. Have you heard of it? Well, looks like Skittles. I want to tell you something. We aren't bringing that in here. That's coming from somewhere. And I want you to know there aren't armchair scientists in America, some kid in his mother's basement making rainbow fentanyl. That's being brought in from other countries. And we're letting it happen. And we were worried about COVID. We were worried about some kind of pandemic. The worst pandemic and epidemic this country has ever seen has been happening right now over the last 5 years, and it's drug overdoses. The number one cause of death between 25-year-olds and 45-year-olds is drug overdose, and it hits every community. And that's why I'm fed up with politicians, because none of them have done a thing about it. And we all know how to fix the problem. It's shut that border. But none of them will do it. That's why I don't stand behind them. But our young people are dying. You know, the overdose capital of the world, you know where it is? Huntington, West Virginia. Huntington, where Marshall University is. Huntington, West Virginia is the overdose capital of the world. And you know, when you go to the Ohio Valley, I think of that as my people. And this is what they've become. And it scares me. Peace. How do you deal with them? How do you work with people? It's not always easy. but we do what we can, and God came to bring peace between man. Peacemakers, they have a name, and I'll quit here. I think I've gone too long. I haven't been paying attention. Peacemakers are called children of God. Notice in Revelation 21:7, he that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. John 3:2, beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Charles Wesley, the great hymn writer, he said, I rest beneath the Almighty's shade, my griefs expire, my troubles cease. Thou, Lord, on whom my soul is stayed, will keep me still in perfect peace. We may not always have the answer for the problems that happen in our life. I decided long ago to wait on God. And I want to tell you something. When I pray, I believe that I get answers. Now, I've never heard God say an answer audibly in the air. Okay? I'm not talking about that. But I pray and I wait for a peace about it. All right? Sometimes that takes a long time. But we are children of God when we are making peace in the world. And so I'll leave you with that. Peacemaking is an attribute of God. Someone might ought to say, like Father, like Son. And so we follow after peace in as much as we can with all men, not just the ones that are fun to be around, not just the ones that benefit us, but everyone. Tonight, the invitation is yours. Won't you come?